Well, first of all, I'd like to thank NENA for inviting me to make a presentation today. Also to acknowledge the Wiradjuri, the traditional owners of the area, Wiradjuri people. And sorry about the auntie, the elder, who's sick. Give my regards to her later on. I had some things ready to put up, but I'm not very good with the technology myself, so my USB didn't work. But I'll send it on to Michelle there, and if people would like it, maybe she'll send it out by email to people if they want. So I guess to do with an economy, I've had several people who influenced me over the years. My own family, many Aboriginal people, blackfellas. I'll use the term blackfellas because I'm sort of more comfortable with that, if that's all right. And if you don't mind, I'll say the word whitefellas. I'm sorry, I'm comfortable with that too. Among ourselves, it's just a way of talking. White people who are used to being with Aboriginal people, they use that term themselves, actually, quite often, whitefellas, blackfellas, and so on. I'll introduce myself, though, too. So I was born in Brisbane, Mary Graham. I was born in Brisbane, but grew up on my father's people's land on the Gold Coast, the Yugambeh Kombu-merri mob. On my mother's side, she was a Waka Waka person. So her area was around about Cherbourg. I don't know if you've heard of that, about 300 or 400 miles northwest of Brisbane Reserve. She was under the Act, but my father wasn't. He wasn't under the Act, so when they married, he had to ask permission from the local police sergeant of the town, of the area, if they could get married, and so he never forgot that and brought her back down to the Gold Coast. So I have lots of relatives around southeast Queensland. I have a talented son, John, published writer. And I've learnt a great deal from family and relatives, friends, and from whitefellas who are friends, and whitefellas in books too. So I learnt a great deal over a long period of time while I was working in all kinds of different things, washing dishes and cleaning on the Gold Coast in different places, in restaurants and cafes. But eventually, I always kept on reading. And one of the things that always interested me about, in answering the question about why the last 230, 50 years, I think, happened, was, which surprised me, was it really came about how, within a particular society, how people treated one another. And as I understood and grew older and learnt more things and so on and so on. And when you're young, you ask your parents why things happen and so on. And I remember asking my father something like this, how come all these things happen? The terrible things, the bad things. And his answer was, which really surprised me, he said, well, they didn't know what they were doing, he said. And I thought it was an amazing thing to say, considering all the things he could have said, considering what happened everywhere. You may know there's a massacre map being created now by some academics at one of the universities, I think. But anyway, that really amazed me. It showed his understanding of things, and it wasn't to do with him being, for example, making it softer for a young person asking a question like that so as not to upset them. That's the first thing you think, oh, well, that's what they have to say, that sort of thing. But he actually really meant it. And he really meant it in the sense of it's a different way of thinking. And I can't go into it too much, mainly because it's just a bit difficult to explain it really in that personal sort of way. But I came across the same kind of thing, the same kind of thinking, when I read years later something by Hannah Arendt. I don't know if people know that name, Hannah Arendt, great German philosopher from the, very hard going. But she spoke about wrong thinking or something, wrong thinking for that what occurred. The terrible things that occurred there in that continent. So all this I'm talking about as a build-up to what I really want to talk about here is that if we're talking about a new economy, I figure that considering all these things that have happened over the last sort of like 10,000 years, I'd say, something like that. This is in the rest of the world, not just here, not here. Well, not just here. Was the idea of security. And it struck me that it all begins with security. If people have a particular view or idea about their relationship with land, with whether you call it territory or property and so on, but land itself, how is it managed, how is it controlled, and what people do actually, how do they live actually. That famous saying, how should I live? It's as if a whole collective of people, different collectives in different continents actually, how should we live? And it seemed as if the answer has all kinds of cultural, there isn't any one answer of course, because there's a great variety of cultural answers, but the main one seemed to be how to have a secure life actually. How to live in security and live in confidence, especially having confidence in your own system of way of life and so on and so on. And that sort of got me to thinking about a whole range of things, everything I'd been learning from relatives and friends, other Aboriginal people and so on, about our own old system, ploughing your way through all the, what would you call it, the mistaken ideas of anthropology. Some interesting ideas too, of course, but those sorts of ideas about anthropology. And it seems as if the very beginning of seeing land in a particular kind of way seemed to stand out. And looking at how Aboriginal people sort of looked at this was sort of vastly different. But it was described in a particular anthropological way which wasn't too positive, as people know. And gradually I know that their views, their arguments have changed over time. They've learnt more things, and learnt the main thing is that their discipline comes from an actual set of cultural values themselves. It's not the truth for all time. It's just, they have an opinion. They come from a particular value, culture, and that's why they think the way they did. So there's some of the things that stand out for me, and when you sort of see it or get it, this particular schematic design, I suppose you'd call it, is that this is the one, I don't know if people could see it, it's basically a circle, And in the centre of that circle is land, place, the relational, origins, beginnings, endings and continuities. So everything starts with land. Land is also like a witness actually to human activity and action. And the things coming out of it or through it for Aboriginal people is essentially the ontology, the idea of relationality. So literally land invents us, so we're obliged to look after it. So a whole set of different attributes have come out of this understanding. And one is autonomy, empathy and ethics, which we never had any word for empathy or ethics, but it's the law, L-A-W, the law, that is, it's actually, the philosophical terms of being with a capital B and becoming with a capital B. So your stance of how you live and then how you go into the world, how you proceed into the world, how you are in a process of becoming and so on. So they have a word for, like, the old word is law for empathy and for ethics and morality and so on. The other one is balance in all things, gender balance, balance in understanding about conflict, and place itself, of course. Place meaning belonging and so on and so on. So the relationship, the first relationship's between humans and other. So it's first of all with land, because it invents us and so on and so on. So those sorts of things, and what comes out of that is also the ideas of reciprocity as a kind of a rule of law, reciprocity. So you look after one another, you look after the land, and that's a template. And of course, the related word thing, it's almost like they're twins, I suppose, in ideas, is stewardship. The idea of looking after something that's larger than ourselves, which is the land, of course. It's larger than ourselves. You would think family would be in the middle, but it's not. In this understanding of existence, land is always in the middle. Because we learn ethics by looking after something that's greater than ourselves, outside of ourselves. And I can't think of any other word except to say sneaky, in a sneaky, odd, roundabout sort of way, you're learning ethics, actually. You're learning principles or ethics. So nobody is ordering you like a spiritual intermediary or something like that, or any kind of great teacher or anything, telling you this is how you are, this is how you must behave, this is how to be good, and so on and so on. You're actually learning it in a roundabout way. And it does two things. You're looking after the land, you're looking after resources, you're managing resources really well. And I know it sounds strange, but we are exploiting it. We are exploiting the land. But the key thing is not to the detriment or disadvantage of anything else. That's the key thing. How to do this exploitation, use, if you like, without, doing this at somebody else's expense. So security from our point of view, and I'm talking about security in the most basic sense too, all, life forms, every life form, organisms. In the very beginning, you're looking after yourself, you're trying to survive. It is survivalist. But whether or not to have a survivalist ethos or a relationalist ethos is an actual choice thing. And I guess, and of course you had to spare 10,000 years or so, tens of thousands of years to work this out. That's what Aboriginal people did. They opted for the idea of a relationalist ethos. So we are survivalists too, but that is in the most basic kind of way. The world, the land and the waters and everything is full of scary stuff, and sometimes scary people, of course, too. But all of that is kind of natural. It's nature, it's a natural thing. It's a further step yet, still, to go as far as working out to have a survivalist ethos. A survivalist ethos tells you that the whole world and ultimately it's a hostile place. And you have to look out for number one, basically. You have to, all the popular sayings, get them before they get you, and so on and so on. But what it means in governance terms is that you have a system whereby you have a security guarantee of some sort. Now that could be in the form of an elite warrior guard, Praetorian Guard in the Roman times, Spartans, the Sparta kind of system. Different cultures have all of those, had different versions of those sorts of security guarantees. And I remember at that last one, I think it was in Brisbane, having a rather, how shall I put it, a robust conversation with a French academic. I had to be a French academic, you know. I like arguing, I'm sure, you know. And he said he couldn't understand how could a people have a stable, efficient society without it being forced. How do you have that? How on earth do you have that? How do you have a peace and stability, you know, without a peacekeeping force to force people to behave in a certain way? And of course, this is all to do with a different view of law altogether, as Michelle and I have often talked about, and Professor Irene Watson talks about very, very well. It's a lawful society. So, very briefly, looking after land in this obligatory way is actually lawful in our terms. It's the law. So our behaviour, stance and conduct, or being and becoming, is actually the law, you know. So we're attending to that. So, and that's exactly how it was done. And of course people did break the law, you know, occasionally. But there were different ways in different places how to handle it and so on. So I'll just try and go a bit quicker. The other one that's sort of a matching this one, I call it a... Oh, sorry. Throwing it away. Sorry, love. I call it an economic world. Thank you. An economic world. And everybody's obviously, you know, you wouldn't be here if you hadn't heard of Adam Smith. A lot of people here. But you know that he wrote a book, wrote something else called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which gets and got quite ignored, fully, just totally ignored. Everybody, economists, just look at that first book, you know, The Wealth of Nations. But The Theory of Moral Sentiments, he says things like, he investigated the need for actions based on values that go well beyond profit-making. He said that prudence, and there's a matching word that I realised when I read that word, Aboriginal people use this word proper, a proper way of conduct, a proper, not just a proper way of making a sandwich or something, but proper as in principled actions. Do you know what I mean? Well, it could mean that too. You know the old book, what is it? The Zen art of motorcycle maintenance. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, it is a bit like that. You know, so proper. But prudence, yeah, was most useful to the individual, but that humanity, justice, generosity, public spirit are the qualities most useful to others. So, if he'd known Aboriginal people, who knows, you know, it's all up in the air, imagination and so on, but he might have understood, saw that that's actually, eventually, that's what we tried to do. We tried to have that because of that close relationship with land. But security is the big thing, you know, I think. And it's wonderful that people do want to have a new economy, you know, and look after food, look after land and so on and so on. But a new economy means a completely different governance system. It's big change. It's not piecemeal, I think. I'm sorry I'm saying this. I don't mean it to sound like a criticism. But it's got to be... it can't be done in, you know, bits and pieces. Starting off, yes, definitely, absolutely. But probably one of the big things is teaching children that. So, sorry, I was just going to go back to this idea. I'm trying to... so, sitting in... the same kind of design, schematic design, but instead of self and community autonomy, you're an autonomous being. And that's the whole idea about introducing acknowledgement of country, you know. It's not just good manners and politeness, it's actually acknowledging the autonomy of the other. And you have to, in Aboriginal terms, you have to say it all the time. You just have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And that's it. It actually, literally, you are maintaining peaceful relations between your neighbours and other people. So you have to keep saying this acknowledgement. And the other person knows that too, you see. So we're autonomous clan groups, autonomous people, and women are autonomous beings also. So in the place of self and community autonomy, it's the individual and the state, the terrible twins, little or weak autonomy. somehow, if somebody could work out how do you strengthen one's autonomy in this, it seems like it's practically impossible, isn't it? You know, unless you want to, I don't know, examine political philosophy. You know, look at, you know, and that's really, really, you know, it's very, very difficult. The other one, spirit and human agency in the Aboriginal one, empathy and ethics, the law. Here it's spirit and human agency still. All these things still exist, but in its place, instead of the law, in a sense, is marketing of life itself and ethics. Everything and anything seemingly can be marketed. Even when we're looking at a new economy, really, you won't be able to avoid a certain amount of marketing, I guess, you know, you won't be able to. I'm not saying all marketing is bad, you know, or all developers are bad or something like that, but just really looking at that very carefully. The other side, events, actions and intent, and on the Aboriginal one is balance. Events, actions and intent is commodification in an economic world. Everything is commodified. We ourselves, everything from the very large to the very small, everything is commodified. Actions, you know, feelings, everything. What isn't commodified, you know? And the other one, the Aboriginal one, individual, family, clan, community, place and belonging, especially belonging. This economic one, the individual, family, community, place and stroke mobility, because it's a mobile world. Sorry, 2 minutes, okay. Yeah. So basically, it just shows a difference. Not saying it's bad, but in Aboriginal terms, an economic world is in a sense, given the long time frame we're talking about, it's you know, we're in this time frame. We're in Aboriginal speak, we're in the time of economics. We're in economics land, you know. It's a completely different way of looking at it. But that's what I would really look at very carefully, is the rules of engagement to do with security, obligations as part of governance, instead of, and I know this might disturb white fellas, especially because it's a tradition of rights, but rights, I have often wondered why obligations aren't more legally stronger than rights in Western legal law. And Michelle explained it very well, why it isn't, you know. But somehow, I don't know how, but somehow obligations should come to the fore rather than rights. And I know that's hard, because we ourselves, you know, talking about human rights, land rights, you know, and so on and so on. But it comes back to our system of obligations. Can't give up obligations. So everybody, all of us can say we have obligations to the next generations. You know, we've got to leave them a world, a good world, you know, a proper world. The only other thing I'd say is something about, I've read NENA, you know, the reasoning why, and I was just going to suggest something like a philosophy or a worldly philosophy, because you're talking about really changing a whole world, do you know? Economics, you know. So something deeper and more philosophical, moral, you know. I know there's problems with that word, but if something could be written up in that way, not just that it's a good idea, because I agree with all these other ideas of recycling and the food, it's especially food safety and so on, all of that. But something, you know, why are you doing it? What is it for? It shouldn't be just for survivalism, because you're still in that framework, you see. Survivalism, security comes first. The best security will come from relationality, the best one. And that's what Aboriginal people found, you know, relationality. It doesn't mean everybody joining their hands and singing Kumbaya and all that kind of stuff. That's rubbish, truly. It really is. Well, it's not rubbish, but it's a bit of a waste of time, because you don't like some people, and that's what's normal also. And I suppose one of the good things that Aboriginal people did work out is, how do you have a system that's stable and efficient while working with people that you don't like, you know. It's easy to do that with people you like and all think alike, but people that you don't like, how do you do that, you know? I guess I'll leave it at that. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah.